Hello everybody and welcome to the War Room. This one is for this weekend's UFC main event. Alexandre Pantoja defending his flyweight title against the newcomer Steve Erceg. Before I get into this, these War Rooms are brought to you by Renzo Gracie Academies. Make sure you check them out. This is the Union Square branch. They've got a whole program of gi, no gi. They've added MMA to it as well. HQ, where the legendary Blue Basement is just a stacked schedule full of superstar coaches and professors. So make sure if you're in New York, if you want to go somewhere and train, if you're a big fan of jiu-jitsu or martial arts in general, come here and learn something. It really is a fantastic place. So these War Rooms are brought to you by Renzo Gracie Academies. Right, let's get into this one. So, Alexandre Pantoja. Of course, he has the experience advantage. We know Pantoja from fighting at a very high level for a long time. We know his style. He's very chaotic. He's very aggressive. That sometimes works out well for him. At times, it's worked out not so well. But one thing that is worth noting is his toughness always shows through. Like he can be reckless in fights because he can recover well. He does take a big shot and he does take it well. And we've seen him hurt, but we've also seen him regroup and really put it on people. Steve Erceg on the other side, of course, he's a bit of a newcomer to the UFC. He's only had 3 fights so far. 12-1 is his record. So again, he lacks in experience compared to Pantoja. And when I first started watching Steve Erceg, and when I found out that he was straight into a title shot, I thought to myself, man, this is a bit too early for him to be fighting Pantoja. But I've gone back and I've watched his fights, and I've gone back and I've watched Pantoja's fights. And the more I watch both of these guys, the more I can see how this fight is going to be competitive, how it could be competitive. Let me do a tail of the tape to start with, and then I'll get into the actual breakdown of these guys' style. So, Steve Erceg has the height and reach advantage. So 5'5" for Pantoja, 5'8" for Steve Erceg. So a 3-inch height advantage, a 1-inch reach advantage as well for Erceg at 68 inches compared to Pantoja at 67. The records is really where a big difference is shown. So 27-5 for Pantoja, 12-1 for Steve Erceg. Of Pantoja's 27 wins, he's got 8 knockouts and 10 submissions. On the other side, Steve Erceg, of his 12 wins, he's got 2 by knockout and he's got 6 by submission. Pantoja's submissions, quite straightforward really. We've got an armbar and a triangle, and we've got officially 7 rear naked chokes, although the one that's listed as a neck crank as well is also technically a rear naked choke position. It just means that his opponent had his chin tucked. But it was still a rear naked choke position. So taking the back and attacking the neck is clearly what Pantoja is very good at. And he's good at staying, like he's sticky like bubble gum in hair. You know what I mean? Once he gets attached to you, he's very good at just kind of flowing through one takedown attempt after the next. Mat return. If you scramble back to your feet and expose your back, he's going to climb up you like a tree and he's going to strangle you. On the other side, Steve Erceg, so he's got 6 submissions on his record. He's got 4 rear naked chokes and 2 guillotines. You can go back and watch his fights before he joined the UFC. He's good at taking the back. He's got good takedown defense, which also opens up opportunities for guillotines and rear naked chokes. He's got good sprawl, good reaction times, especially for a guy that's tall for this division. What I expect is Pantoja to come out aggressively and put it on him straight away. Pantoja's style is a very reckless style. Like we saw him. We've seen him running at people. You watch his fights against Royval. Like he's running at him in the first 5 seconds, throwing punches. He can be very reckless at times, and sometimes he walks onto big shots in that process. The benefit is that most people can't keep up with Pantoja's intensity because he's very good at flowing through grappling, through wrestling attempts and takedowns and submission attempts. He puts this pace on people because he expects their reaction time to not be as adequate as he is for the problems that he's going to throw at them. I actually, as I was watching him, I wrote down, he looks like a fighter that smashes pads and spars. Like, often his technique can be a little bit ragged. Sometimes his body kicks look kind of awkward and he doesn't really throw straight punches necessarily. A lot of things come winging over the top and around the sides. There's not the same level of refinement in his striking skills that we've seen in his grappling. But when it hits the floor, when he does start grappling, we really do start to see his technical ability show through. On the other side, Steve Erceg, good on the ground, much, much better on the feet, in my opinion. Very sharp, very, very fundamentally sound. He's got good footwork, moving in, cutting people down. Very sharp, very crisp with his technique. And given the fact that he does have a height and reach advantage, if he is able to frustrate Pantoja in the early round and catch him with a few shots, he might be able to hold him off for a moment, do some damage to his face. Like we've seen Pantoja take big risks in fights where he does take a lot of shots in the first round, and he is bloody in the first, in the first 5 minutes of a 25-minute fight, which is not ideal. If you're a coach in his corner, you want him to take less damage and be a bit more strategic, I'm sure. But the style that Pantoja has is, it's almost his signature. It'd be difficult for him to change given the fact that that's what people expect, and because it's working for him. Like, he's had 32 fights, he's never been stopped. That's a very, very tough individual. That's a guy that's been in there against some of the best in this division, and he's fought them multiple times and he's beaten them multiple times. The difference here is that Steve Erceg is a very different archetype of fighter. Pantoja's been fighting guys that are quite familiar to him, obviously the likes of Royval and Moreno. Steve Erceg is a different kind of fighter. He stands very tall. He's got very, very disciplined, straight punches. He can build himself into a fight and work off the back foot if he needs to. The benefit here that Pantoja is going to have in his style is that Steve Erceg is tall, and when he is under pressure, he does tend to get tall. Like, you go back and you watch his fight against Costa, and he did get clipped with quite a few right hands. And most of the time he's getting caught with right hands that are coming at unusual angles, that are swinging over the top. I think if you throw straight punches at him, he's going to slip and counter. If you start to get wild and start to push forward aggressively, I would imagine Erceg is going to start to back up and move away. And he tends to do this as he backs up. His hands and his head separate. So his hands get closer to his opponent and his head comes up and gets tall. This is where he's eating these big shots. Now, both of these guys have got the opportunity to batter the lead leg, and that is definitely going to change the way that they fight. Steve Erceg can be very, very tactical with his kicks, and if he can damage and disable that lead leg of Pantoja, it's going to stop that initial flurry. He's going to be able to read that flurry or a level change, a takedown opportunity. Certain things that are going to make Pantoja's life difficult and make his game easier to predict for Steve Erceg. Like Erceg, I don't think he has the depth in his game, but he certainly has the skills in his game that he needs to beat someone like Pantoja. It would be more difficult for someone like for Erceg to fight someone like Moreno, because Moreno's in and out of range. He's quicker. He's very disciplined with his jab. Pantoja's style does open itself up to someone like Steve Erceg, and the more I watched it, my first thought is, well, Pantoja's going to come out. He's going to start aggressively in the first 5 or 10 seconds. He's going to be flying at Steve Erceg. He's going to potentially catch him with a big overhand right or a big sweeping left hook that might rock Erceg, knock him off balance. Pantoja's going to be in on a body lock. He's going to trip. He's going to reap. He's going to drag him to the floor, and then he's going to climb up him and take his back. And I expected Pantoja. My first prediction when this fight was matched is I thought, Pantoja's probably going to sub him mid-second round. And it wouldn't surprise me if he catches him with a big shot first, shoots a takedown, and then he's able to catch Steve Erceg in the flurry, in the fury of the flurry. But at the same time, that depends on how that first round goes. Like, Pantoja has to have some success in that first round. He has to be able to push Steve Erceg back and put him on some of the ends of some of those right hands that come over the top. If he can get a body lock and a clinch, he can certainly test Steve Erceg's grappling. I feel like Erceg's going to be much more difficult to get to the floor than he is to be dealing with on the floor. Like, when Pantoja hits the floor, although he has got a very aggressive game, much like his stand-up, it's far more tactical. He's very good at pinning legs to the floor and passing while he's punching. And he knows when to disengage the position and scramble to the next one. This is his experience, and this is really where Pantoja, for me, looks like a world-class fighter and a champion. But the recklessness of his stand-up game is really where Steve Erceg can get into this fight. Keep touching him with that jab, pop him with the cross, and then when he comes crashing in, he's got that lovely counter left hook. The accuracy and the efficiency of Steve Erceg's striking as well is going to bode well for him. We know he's done championship fights before his time in the UFC. It's very different to the level that Pantoja's been fighting at, obviously, as well as not only the pressure but the level of opponents. But that doesn't mean that Steve Erceg is going to come in here feeling like he's out of his depth. He knows that he's been in championship fights, and he knows he's got the height and reach advantage. And he's also been looking at Pantoja work his way through this division and sees opportunities where he can beat him. Like there's definitely a very technical approach from Steve Erceg, and I do feel like that works well for him in this fight because it's 25 minutes, because he's got someone that's very, very aggressive. Like, if Erceg can slow Pantoja down with that jab, with that cross, and defend a couple of takedowns in the first round, he could make Pantoja look like he's stuck on the outside and can't get close to him. Then you get some more frustration coming out of Pantoja, which makes him more reckless. It makes him more angry. Like, he fights already like he's running out of time. And obviously, we're all running out of time, both in a lifetime sense, but also in a combat sports sense. Like, he knows he's got 25 minutes to fight, and Pantoja fights like he's going to make the most of every second because he's loving the fight and he doesn't want the 25 minutes to come to an end. Steve Erceg on the other side, he's about counting down the 25 minutes in this fight, picking off Pantoja and slowing him down in the first round or two, and then starting to really put money in the bank in the later 3 rounds. It's going to be a tough fight for Erceg, and we know that Pantoja is very difficult to stop, so I expect it's going to be volume and consistency from Erceg. That's where his accuracy and his efficiency come in, because he's going to be able to fight over a longer period of time. He's going to be able to maintain his composure and not expend unnecessary energy throwing punches that are missing, throwing punches that are landing on the guard. Pantoja does expend loads of energy, but that's also because he knows he's got that 25 minutes in the gas tank, even when he's pushing really hard and he's being reckless and he's missing takedowns and missing punches. Let's just for 1 second focus on the Matt Schnell fight, because Matt Schnell's I remember interviewing him a few years ago, and he stuck out in my mind of all the fighters that I've spoken to as having a very cerebral approach. He's very, very good at dismantling and applying his own game. It doesn't always work out for him in the fights. Like, you remember in the Pantoja fight, though, that he was looking good. He had Pantoja rocked early on, and then Pantoja, of course, he split him with that right hand into and caught him on the chin as he was moving in. A little bit too reckless for Matt Schnell in that scenario, and he paid, because Pantoja was able to weather the early storm, took some shots, and was able to find that split counter right hand that put Schnell on the floor. You look at Steve Erceg's fight, and he was far more controlled against Matt Schnell. It was more difficult for Matt Schnell to get close to him. And then that tight left hook that he landed, that wasn't an exchange of punches. That was a beautiful setup by Erceg. In the Pantoja-Schnell fight, that was Schnell crashing forward and being countered on the way in. I think that fight alone is a good example of how these two fighters are different. Pantoja was losing that round until he won it. Steve Erceg was in control the whole time. Like, does the pressure, does the fury of Pantoja getting close enough to Steve Erceg to crack him with that right hand over the top, is he able to get on a body lock? Because you've got to remember, Steve Erceg is taller. There is more body there to grab. His waist is going to be smaller than some of these other flyweights. So is Pantoja able to get a hold of that body lock and wrestle and move him around, and then potentially expose the back and find that rear naked choke? Or is he going to waste a lot of time, and is Erceg going to be able to get free and get it back to a striking range, where now you've got both of these guys that have expended a lot of energy, but now Erceg has got the more efficient and effective striking on the feet? That is really a question for me. I still think the fury of Pantoja is going to make it very difficult for Erceg in the first 2 rounds. If I'm in Erceg's corner, I'm talking about traditional boxing technique after the second round onwards. Walk him down, pick him off, use your footwork if you need to, but don't get too tall when you're backing up. Like, 2 really, really dangerous things to do when you're a tall guy and you're being pushed back is to get tall, allow your head to come out of your hands, because it also, it makes your legs, your lower body available. It also makes your body available. So you're either looking at getting caught with low kicks or body locks or a variety of different things when you're a tall fighter backing up, if you don't get caught with the big overhand over the top. I don't think it's going to be a good idea for Steve Erceg to try and grapple with Pantoja at all. His back taking is good, his takedown defense is good, but I do feel like if he starts to engage in the grappling with Pantoja, that's where he's going to look like he's out of his depth. Pantoja's ground game is really tremendous, and the recklessness of his style of fighting on the feet to an extent undermines how good his grappling is, in my opinion. I do think he is very sharp. What else? So the Perez fight with Pantoja is a really good example of the way that Pantoja fights. You know, he clinched him, he took the back, he tripped him with an outside reap, and he took the back as he was climbing up. And as I said, that was the neck crank. It was listed as a neck crank on his record. It was a rear naked choke position. The credit is to Perez that he kept his chin tucked, which meant it turned into a neck crank. But that was more the choice on the victim than anything. Pantoja's back taking is really, really very, very slick, and he can do it from a lot of different positions. And he's also great at going from, okay, I've got this position, this is not going to work out, I'm not going to get what I want from this position, let me drop this and move to the next one. That confidence to flow from one position to the next is something that a lot of fighters struggle with. A lot of fighters will find themselves in a position, they're like, oh, this is the safe position, I'll stick with this. And Pantoja doesn't have that. He has this ferocity which allows him just to be on the attack constantly. Even though he does get tired, he's still very effective. He fights tired. He looks tired in the first round sometimes. And if you watch the Countdown show, you'll watch him kicking pads. I don't like people kicking, and I don't like people doing striking to exhaustion because technique does get bad. But if you're used to training exhausted, then your technique is going to be effective regardless because that's how you train. And I do feel like that the style of Pantoja, although it can be scrappy and messy, it can be effective because of the intensity with which he applies it. It should be an interesting fight, this one. I think a lot of people are going to be underestimating Steve Erceg. It's a big step up in competition. It's a big ask for him to go to Brazil and take on Pantoja. But at the same time, like, these are the kind of circumstances where someone comes out of nowhere, has a couple of really impressive performances, and then surprises everybody with the level that they perform at when they get that title shot. I'm not underestimating Steve Erceg. I've seen the skills in his game to beat everybody in this division. Question is he ready for it now? Is he going to be able to maintain his composure and fight with a smart game plan all the way through this fight? Or is he going to get overwhelmed at times by the intensity and the fury of Pantoja? But don't underestimate Steve Erceg based on his record or based on how he looks, because he is a rather unassuming guy. But he's very, very effective with his skills, and I think he knows how to apply the skills that he's got to whoever he's facing. And Pantoja does leave himself open a lot. There's opportunities here for Steve Erceg with the right game plan. All right, enjoy these fights. Shout out to Renzo Gracie Academies. Enjoy these fights, and I'll see you next time.